Hello. Hello, friends. This onslaught, this unseen human misery, disaster, death, sickness that has been inflicted upon us by COVID, Corona, whichever name you would like to address it by, has without a doubt been an unconcealed tale of horrific misery for people all over the world. When the misery has been absorbed, and we've had a little bit of time to think and look back on what the story exactly has been about, it reads like a kind of a mystery thriller as well. What are the origins? What is the possibility? Was this a kind of a natural pandemic? We were fed ever since December 2020, when the story broke out. We were fed constantly with doses of very authentic and very impressive explanations that it was a kind of wrath of nature. It was a species jump of a virus. But 18 to 24 months down the line, that construct, that story is strongly challenged. And let us look at it. How? I don't think there is anyone around who by this time have not been completely sick of this picture of a kind of mass of RNA with this spiky proteins all around it. I think, we've been looking at this graphic, this picture, this cartoon, and been thinking about it probably in our dreams as well. Now, as we said, the story that we were being sort of told, the tale that was told so far was that this is a virus that belongs to the colony or the species of viruses called the coronavirus, which are essentially composed of RNA, as opposed to most other living beings which are composed of DNA. And this, on its outer envelope, has these spiky proteins. And these spikes are actually like, it's like hooks, and they are trying to get attached to a cell. And by attaching to a cell, they invade the interior of the cell, get this RNA to multiply rapidly inside our cells, and thereby they derange the cellular processes inside and cause all this sort of sickness and problems. Why did we as human beings suddenly find ourselves to be so vulnerable, find ourselves to be so susceptible to this problem? But simply because this virus was completely unknown to us so far. Never ever in our existence has our physiology, has our immunity encountered anything like this. And so we were constantly caught napping, and this caused the problem as it did. So this was the story so far. A quick look at the timeline of the COVID virus. A quick look at the timeline of the COVID virus tells us that where are we now? As I speak to you now, we are in the early part of June 2021. We are now sort of rewinding back in time a little bit to December 2020. December 2019, pardon. So it was somewhere in the end of first week of December 2019, if you're very particular about the dates. It was the 8th of December 2019 that the first cases were officially noted and recorded in Wuhan, the principal city of the Hubei province. And in Wuhan, hospitals recorded the first case of strange pneumonia, and they went on insisting that yes, this is a viral pneumonia. It seems a little bit mischievous, it seems troublesome, but don't worry about it. It does not spread. It does not spread at all from human to human. We will treat these cases, get a hang of what is happening. You need not worry about any of this at all. And this is a kind of mood, and this is a kind of spirit in which most of December was spent. And a blip happened here, and this was 13th of January. So as cases literally unnoticed by the rest of the world, as cases went on increasing, a good number of people died. Most of them were treated in the Wuhan Central Hospital. On 13th of January, the first person to have been infected with COVID outside of China, and this happened in Thailand, most probably in Bangkok. And within a very short time of this gentleman, I think, getting infected in Bangkok, the University of Thailand, the University of Bangkok, I forget the official name, it's a pretty long Thai name, they were actually first of the block to identify the virus by their genetic or genomic analysis. And as soon as they had done it, within a few hours of that, a report came out of Shanghai saying that we agree with this. And this looks quite a bit different from the previous fellows we had known, like SARS-CoV-1. There was something called Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus, or the MERS. It looks quite different from it. And it went by the name of SARS-CoV-2 or SARS-CoV-19. But as all this scientific, parlays were happening, cases were increasing, people were falling sick, and along with the Chinese authorities, the World Health Organization, who were like brothers in arms, they went on reassuring us that there is nothing to worry about. We've got things under the tap. It does not look like a terribly contagious disease until we come to the end of January. And by the end of January, we are somewhere in the 29th, 30th of January, in the year 2020, that the WHO said that, look, this doesn't really look like our, very familiar, innocent kind of influenza. They finally had to admit, they finally had to get under the sort of hanging on from China's coattails. And they announced that this is a disease of great concern with human-to-human spread. But mind you, the announcement of a pandemic, the announcement that we need to take note of this and we need to stop international travel, etc., ASAP, that did not happen till the middle of March. Now, as the story unfolds, we will get to know that really, funny things were happening much before 8th of December. So there is no reason to believe that 8th of December, which is accepted as the first time when this came into public visibility, there is no reason to believe that 8th of December was actually the start date. Well, when the story of COVID gets written, two people will have a lot to answer for. One of them, obviously, is President Xi Jinping at the helm of the Chinese affairs, because there is no way, he can absolve himself of responsibility, because obviously nothing, not even a stone drops in China without him knowing. And the other person who has a lot of blood on his hands is the sort of commander-in-chief of World Health Organization, Dr. Theodoros of Ethiopia. And Dr. Theodorus, honestly, till the time he was made the, I think, whatever you call it, the president or whatever of the world, the chief of WHO, his track record is a little bit, it has quite a few spots in it, because there were quite a few African epidemics which Dr. Theodorus is supposed to have sort of brushed under the carpet. So today there is genuine concern as whether Dr. Theodorus was actually more adept in controlling epidemics or suppressing them. If at all, few of us have escaped from this pandemic alive, or at least till the date. I think we owe a large amount of debt to this young Chinese ophthalmologist, Li Wenliang. Li Wenliang was noticing a lot of people in the Wuhan hospitals with a funny kind of pneumonia, conjunctivitis, etc. And it was as clear as daylight, because this was not like a 2-day, 3-day fever. People were dying right, left, and center from it. And nobody had the guts to utter a word till he posted on the Chinese platform WeChat. And that post was picked up by a couple of Western English-speaking journalists who could read Chinese. And one of them was a lady from Wall Street Journal. So as records tell us, at Wall Street Journal sometime in mid-January 2020 was perhaps the first international publication to have got wind of the fact that this is not any other fever going around in Wuhan. And that happened because Li Wenliang's post was picked up and read. Li went through untold misery because of his post. I don't know what punishment was heaped on him, but there was plenty of it. And unfortunately, he contracts COVID, I think sometime in January, and he dies. He succumbs to COVID. But the world has to pay him a lot of respect and gratitude, because if not for him, this back scratching between China and WHO would have continued for another month. And this would have been a true apocalypse, far worse than we were seeing today. So coming back to the story that was being fed to you and me so far, what was the story being fed? That it originated from a particular type of bats, which are found in China. And the bats somehow managed to spread it onto the pangolins. And the bat to pangolin transmission, how did it happen, was completely unclear. And the pangolins were brought to the wet markets of Wuhan. Wet market is, I don't know, the Bengalis amongst you may understand, Bengalis love fish. And almost a couple of times a week, every morning, a Bengali goes out to the fish market to buy a live, fresh fish. But in the Chinese fresh fish market or whatever, there's a lot more than fish which is sold over there. The Chinese eat a wide variety of species. And it appears a little bit bizarre that I believe even the pangolin, after you have taken the scales off, is considered to be a delicacy in China. So somehow a very far-fetched connection was drawn up between the bat and the pangolin, and via the wet market to the people of Wuhan. And that was the conventional storyline. But a whole lot of people, as early as January 2020, were found to be infected with severe disease who had nothing to do with the Wuhan food market. But what was even more mystifying is that this bad story kind of collapsed. Now, it is very well, we have known it for quite some time that the bats do have every living creature has its own inherent flora and microbiological sort of flora and fauna in them. And the bats harbor a whole lot of coronaviruses. Influenza virus is a coronavirus. SARS-CoV-1 is a coronavirus. MERS virus is a coronavirus. And in the past, there have been some connections in which the species transmission, like when it happened for SARS-CoV-1, it was thought that the bat somehow managed to transmit it to the civets. You can look it up. Civets are a sort of a mongoose-like creature. And then from the civets to the humans. In the MERS, which the breakout was in the Middle East, it was thought to be with the camel being the intermediary. But this time, the story appeared to be really stretched out, because most of these bat species in China was in a place called Yunnan. And Yunnan is about 1,500 kilometers away from Wuhan. And Wuhan, the area of Hubei and the area of Wuhan, has never ever been known to harbor any kind of these, been infested with bats who in some way or the other has come in contact with humans. Of course, bats can fly. Bats are normally not given an airline ticket. But a bat can fly for about, 20, 25 kilometers. Can you imagine bats from the Yunnan area covering 1,500 kilometers and coming over to Wuhan and infecting all kinds of, men and animals in that region? I don't think the story holds much water at all. So even though, this grand old tale was being repeated over and over and over and over again, the more it was repeated, the lighter it appeared. With the work of some very inquisitive and educated science writers and scientists, the spotlight gradually fell on the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Wuhan Institute of Virology is an extremely well-respected institute. This is no smuggling den. This is no sort of bootlegged kind of a place where all kind of contraband activities are happening. It is a well-recognized virological institute. In fact, I think Wuhan has at least two very important virological institutes. There was a second one which was under private control, and that was shut down soon after, I think, February 2020. But Wuhan Institute of Virology, what did they specialize in? What did they work in? Their main focus was work focused on the coronavirus. What was the central theme of the research that they were involved in? Virologists in Wuhan were primarily involved in what is called gain of function research. Now, what does it mean, gain of function research? It basically means that you are trying to kind of think ahead and predict that how some of the viruses which are there in and around us, at present they are harmless and innocuous. How can I make them more ferocious, more infective? Nature may be doing that in the course of next, God knows, 100,000 years. But can I supersede nature? Can I play God? And can I try to simulate, provoke those changes inside the lab so that, I'm able to play God over here. It gives some kind of ghastly satisfaction to a group of people to say that we have bioengineered something in the lab. We have made a wolf from a dog, what was a harmless viral species. I can tweak a few things here and there, make it a lot more virulent, and then justify that by saying that, look, nature may have done it a few 100,000 years down the line. So I'm just kind of doing something that nature would have done before. And in doing so, I have given myself like a biological bullet, a biological weapon, a biological bomb. The next war, when it is fought, the next world war, may well be fought without a bullet being fired. When we look deeper into what the ethos, the central subject of the research in Wuhan Institute of Virology was, then this will come in front of us. Well, how do we know of all this? We know of all this thanks to the untiring and detailed effort of a lot of people. And I will pick up the names of one of them, that is Nicholas Wade. Nicholas Wade has been a science editor, I think, for New York Times for more than 3 decades. He has thousands of very weighty publications in all kinds of scientific journals. And the amount of detail in which Nicholas Wade has really gone in this article, the link is over there, that was published in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, is absolutely amazing. Myself, being a doctor, we've had a smattering of virology in our undergraduate days. But the virological details in which Nicholas Wade has written this article, please go through it. It's an open access article available in the net. And some nearer home, some of our journalists have also done very good detailed justice to the subject. And I found this write-up in the Science Wire equally very, very impressive. Origins of COVID-19, who opened the Pandora's box in Wuhan, people or nature. Wonderfully written. So, back to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Who was the center of the project? There were quite a few people. Dr. Zheng Li Shi was one of the principal. She's kind of identified as being the head of the Wuhan lab. And as the Wuhan lab was working, we will just see in a minute what they were working on. There were a lot of concerns expressed, at times we believe by Dr. Shi herself, that every microbiological, virological lab has its levels of security, level 1, 2, 3, 4, so that accidents, spillages, leakages does not happen from the lab. Dr. Shi herself and many other scientists who were coming in and out of the lab, visiting it, etc., were very concerned about the fact that the Wuhan lab was working under very low levels of security. If memory serves me right, level 1 was considered, level 4 is the highest level of virological security in a lab, and Wuhan lab was mostly working at the level of 1 or 2. So just as you have convicts escaping from the jail, a few of these viruses escaping from the lab was not unnatural or unexpected at all. And as a proof of that fact, December 8th, the official date, December 8th of 2019, when officially the first cases were recognized, is preceded by at least a month and a half. In November 2019, may have well been in October 2019 as well, quite a few cases of people from the Wuhan lab were falling sick with this pneumonia, getting admitted to the hospital, and many of them did not come back home. So it looks as if that the bits of the puzzle are kind of beginning to fit one another. So what exactly was the Wuhan lab working on? The Wuhan lab seems to be focusing on the thesis of how these hook-like spike proteins attaches themselves to the ACE receptors, the receptors on the human cell. And a lot of focus was going around there as to how to make this attachment of the virus to the human cells easier, more effective, so that the viral RNA could easily find its way into the human cell and then go on doing whatever it wanted to do. Who would the work be carried out on? Do you think, it's very logical for you to think that since the work was on human cells, you would require a whole lot of a lot of men being lined up in the labs and being injected with the funny solution for experiment. Well, no. This day and age, you do not need human beings as the guinea pigs. We clone or we genetically engineer animals, mice, to be very particular in this case, that the mice are genetically programmed to produce certain human cells. And these human cells, which are retrieved from the programmed mice, are then worked upon to go on trying the different permutations and combinations that have by upscaling, doing all the fiddling around with the structure, the protein sequence, etc., of this business. Am I able to am I making this process easier, thereby making the virus more dangerous and more lethal? I think you probably got the gist of the story. This is a little sort of cartoon from Science Simplified, and this is what how does the virus enter our body? The virus enters our body through the nose, mouth, which are open to the atmosphere, finds its way to the respiratory tract, and when inside the respiratory tract, now the fun and game starts, that the virus gets into the act of attaching itself to these receptors on the human cells. And if we have really enabled them, empowered them, fiddled around with them to make this process easier, then, as we just said a little earlier, we have made a wolf out of a dog. Now, soon after the outbreak, when the world was in turmoil, a whole lot of articles started appearing in a scientific press that, look, this genome does not look to have been fiddled around. There were articles in the Lancet, Nature, etc. This is the genomic analysis of the virus, and this did not suggest that there was a fiddling in it. And just to give you an example, When you and I are writing today, we do not use an eraser to rub out things anymore, do we? Use a computer. Who's there to check out the fact that how many times have I rewritten a line? So the kind of evidence that we were looking for in the viral genome to be on the lookout for the things of cut and paste were old-fashioned. So if you look at the articles, I'm not going to bore you with the details. There are things like the fusion cleavage, etc., etc. There are pinpoint evidence in the manipulation in the various spike protein loci, which is suggestive of the fact that certain fiddling around has taken place. And who are the people? Who are the people who were writing about this? Two names keeps cropping up. Peter Daszak, who's associated with some EcoHealth Alliance, and Christian Anderson with Scripps Research, who were inundating the press and the magazines and the journals, saying that, look, we do not find any evidence of manipulation. Well, brilliant. But these are the people who were directly linked and involved with this research in the Wuhan lab. In the scientific write-ups, they claimed no conflict of interest, but they had profound conflict of interest. Peter Daszak was linked with, via his trust or foundation, via the National Institute of Health USA, at the helm of which we have Anthony Fauci, so these were like international projects. And both of them, who had profound conflicts of interest, there is undeniable evidence of them being linked with the Wuhan project, were the first one to roll out the kind of clarifications, or rather sort of unveiled, unsuccessful confessions that look, this is not the case. There was no manipulation. It was this, back to pangolin, pangolin to man kind of story. Amazing. And it is also disheartening that how reputed scientific journals accepted their write-ups and articles without even inquiring or later on declaring their conflict of interest status. This has happened before in the story of virology. This has happened many, many, many times before. And one of the latest examples being when all this furore happened during the HIV or the AIDS virus, which broke out in the entire period of early 80s to mid 80s, was sort of dominated by the fracas between Luc Montagnier of Paris, who claimed to have discovered the HIV virus, and Robert Gallo from New York, who claimed that I discovered it. Tutu Meme happened for about a decade, and it required a meeting between Ronald Reagan and Jacques Chirac to resolve this controversy. At the end of it all, Luc Montagnier got the Nobel Prize for the discovery of HIV, and Robert Gallo still licks his wounds. And Luc Montagnier, and because of this constant bickering between the two labs, people were very, very miffed about the fact that even from their labs, in those days in the early 80s, when there wasn't as much as investigative journalism and internet and open access and all this kind of thing, how did AIDS break out in Africa is still shrouded in mystery. We still cannot account for the fact there is no line of transmission which is definitely lined up as to how AIDS broke up in Africa. It will probably require some investigative, brilliant young mind to put bits of those puzzles together. So Nicholas Wade has done us a whole lot of good in coming out with this wonderfully researched article. So what are we on about at this point of time? Without a doubt, the last word is still to be spoken. Without a doubt, the investigation in its true scientific sense needs to carry on. And what I have made of it so far is that I think it is equally puerile to think that some crazy Chinese scientist in some lab in Wuhan was kind of throwing open vats of viruses into the atmosphere. I think that is an oversimplified horror scenario, but it is very, 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 very plausible that from a lab where focused research was taking place with this virus, making it more dangerous, more infective, functioning in low levels of security, that a spillage happened either through people getting infected or through virological samples, animals leaking out. And if you draw this hypothesis further, there is probable kind of thought processes which tell us that one of the reasons why some of the vaccines came on as fast as they did, that maybe some of the vaccines were already made, the prototypes were already made time in advance. So where we stand today, friends, through the death, through the suffering, through the sickness, through the carnage, we cannot leave our faculty of scientific inquisition and scientific investigation behind. Like a convict escaping from the jail, at this point of time, it looks very, very likely that this virus had escaped out of the lab. Science has to be responsible. The objective of research has to be ethical and accountable. And once, hopefully, sometime in the not too distant future, let's stop the show. In the not too distant future, when we have recovered from the deep wounds of this bloody battle, we will gain some better control of these dangerous scientific processes. We have suffered. We don't want our sons and daughters to suffer in the same way ever again. Thank you. Be well.
I can stop.
Right?
Stop. Pass it. Stop recording.